The mining expedition. The vast darkness of space hung over the command deck of the Harvester Prime, broken only by the glow of holographic displays and the distant blue-green jewel of the target planet. Admiral Xelvoth's 6 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of satisfaction among the Scathraxian elite. "Status report on Operation Mineral Vein," he demanded, his voice a low rumble that resonated through the chamber. Science Officer Narleth glided forward, her translucent appendages rippling with bioluminescent patterns indicating her excitement. "The primitive world exceeds our initial resource estimates, Admiral. Preliminary scans show concentrations of rare minerals in quantities unseen in our territory for 3 generations. We've detected particularly high readings of neutronium, quantum crystals, and stabilized gravitite, all essential for our fleet expansion." Xelvoth's feeding tentacles quivered with anticipation. The unified stellar coalition was facing resource depletion across its 17 systems. This discovery could secure his place in the historical archives and ensure the coalition's dominance for centuries to come, and the indigenous population. "Their capability assessment?" he inquired, mandibles clicking. "Primitive," replied Security Director Grashnak, his armored carapace gleaming under the chamber lights. "They've barely achieved rudimentary space exploration. Their technology is laughably basic. They still rely on chemical propulsion for most applications. They've established a few orbital habitats and a small base on their natural satellite, but nothing that poses any threat to our operations." Xelvoth moved his massive form toward the main viewing portal, contemplating the blue planet. "Conventional extraction would alert them to our presence. Even primitives can be troublesome when defending their territory." The Admiral's strategist, Vex Morth, stepped forward, her cybernetic enhancements humming softly. "We've developed an alternative approach, Admiral. We've identified a rogue planetary body in the outer reaches of this system. With minimal adjustment to its trajectory using our gravitational manipulators, we can bring it into an elongated orbit around the target world." The display shifted, showing simulations of the celestial mechanics at play. "The gravitational effects will create persistent geological instability," Vexmorth continued, "exposing deep mineral veins without our direct intervention. The tidal disruptions will simultaneously destabilize their civilization, preventing organized resistance while we extract what we need. They'll attribute the events to natural cosmic phenomena." Admiral Xelvoth's mouthparts stretched into what his species considered a smile. "Elegant. Resource acquisition without direct confrontation. Begin preparations immediately." The gravitational manipulators deployed from the Coalition fleet formed a network around the dark, frozen rogue planet. Energy surged through the network as the massive engines of the fleet synchronized their output, generating a gravitational corridor that would subtly alter the trajectory of the celestial body. On the command deck, Engineering Chief Zothkrax monitored the operation with meticulous attention. "Gravitational displacement at 30% and rising. The planetary body is responding to our influence. Maintain precise trajectory control," ordered Xelvoth. Even a slight miscalculation could render the entire operation useless. Hours stretched into days as the massive rogue planet gradually shifted its course, guided by the invisible hand of the Coalition's technology. The engineering crew worked in rotation, maintaining the delicate balance required for such a precise astronomical manipulation. "Admiral," called Science Officer Narleth, her voice pitched higher than normal, "I'm detecting an anomaly in the planet's core composition." Xelvoth turned his attention to her station. "Elaborate." "The planetary core contains unexpected concentrations of quantum reactive elements. They're amplifying our gravitational input by a factor of 17. Vexmorth rushed to analyze the new data. "This changes the trajectory calculations. The planet will approach the target world more quickly and on a closer path than we intended." "Will it impact?" demanded Xelvoth. After a tense moment of calculation, Vexmorth responded, "Negative, Admiral. It will establish an elliptical orbit, but the gravitational effects will be far more pronounced than our models predicted. The geological disruptions will be significant. Can we abort the operation? Engineering Chief Zothkrax chittered nervously. Negative, Admiral. The process has progressed beyond the point of reversal. The planetary body has achieved momentum. Zelvoth's feeding tentacles contracted in frustration. Adjust our extraction timeline accordingly. If the disruptions will be more severe, we must be prepared to move more quickly. There's more, interrupted Narleth. Our long-range scans of the target world have detected higher levels of electromagnetic communication than expected. Their technological development appears uneven. While their space capabilities remain primitive, their information technology and global communication network are surprisingly sophisticated. The Admiral considered this information carefully. Deploy observation probes to monitor their response to the astronomical event. We need to assess whether they'll recognize this as artificial. If necessary, we'll accelerate our timeline. On Earth, Dr. Eleanor Chen stared at her computer screen in disbelief. The astronomical data streaming in from observatories around the world confirmed what she had first noticed 3 days ago. An uncharted planetary body had somehow appeared in the outer solar system and was moving on an unusual trajectory. Julian, come look at this, she called to her colleague. Dr. Julian Ramirez abandoned his own workstation and peered over Eleanor's shoulder. That can't be right. Nothing that size should have escaped detection until now. Yet here it is, Eleanor replied, adjusting the parameters of her simulation. And look at its trajectory. It's going to settle into an elliptical orbit that brings it between Earth and Mars at its closest approach. Julian ran a hand through his hair, his expression grave. The gravitational effects will be catastrophic, Eleanor finished. Tidal disruptions, seismic activity, weather pattern destabilization. We need to alert the International Astronomical Authority immediately. Within hours, observatories and space agencies worldwide were focused on the approaching celestial body. Emergency meetings of world leaders were convened as scientists scrambled to understand the implications and develop response strategies. In the Situation Room of the White House, President Harrington listened grimly as the director of NASA explained the situation. "We're calling it Nemesis," said Director Collins. "It's approximately 60% the mass of Earth, composed primarily of ice and rock. Its appearance defies astronomical understanding. It simply wasn't there in any of our previous deep space surveys." "Could it be artificial?" asked the Secretary of Defense. "Some kind of stealth technology?" Collins shook his head. "It's definitely a natural planetary body. What's unnatural is its trajectory. The odds of it naturally finding its way into such a specific orbit are astronomically small." "You're suggesting it was placed there," the President stated flatly. "I'm suggesting it was guided there," Collins corrected. "And that implies the existence of a civilization with technology far beyond our own." President Harrington's face remained impassive, but her eyes betrayed her concern. "Intentions? Unknown," admitted Collins. "But the effects of Nemesis of orbit will create significant planetary disruptions. We're looking at increased tectonic activity, extreme tidal events, and widespread meteorological disturbances. Major coastal cities will need to be evacuated within months." The President stood, her decision made. Initiate the Planetary Defense Protocol. Full cooperation between all space agencies, military branches, and research institutions. If someone or something placed that rogue planet in our path, I want to know why. And I want options on my desk for how to respond. From the observation deck of the Harvester Prime, Zelvoth watched as the massive planetary body, now designated Nemesis by the humans, settled into its new orbit. Already, the gravitational effects were becoming visible. Increased volcanic activity, stronger oceanic tides, and weather systems growing more volatile across the blue planet. "The extraction vessels are prepared, Admiral," reported Operations Director Cals Thu. "Once the major mineral deposits are exposed by the tectonic activity, we can begin harvesting." "And the indigenous response?" asked Excelvoth. Security Director Grashnak displayed the intercepted communications from Earth. They've detected the astronomical anomaly and recognized it as artificial. However, they have no means of determining our presence or intentions. They're primarily focused on mitigating the effects on their population centers. Vexmorth analyzed the data flowing from the observation probes. Their response is more coordinated than anticipated. They're pooling resources and knowledge globally. Several of their nation-states have suspended long-standing conflicts to address this common threat. Science Officer Narleth appeared hesitant. Admiral, I've been analyzing their information networks. They're advancing their understanding of gravitational physics at an accelerated rate. Several of their research institutions have already proposed theories that come remarkably close to explaining our manipulation technology. Impossible, scoffed Grashnak. They couldn't possibly make such leaps in understanding. It appears they can, insisted Narleth. And there's something else. They've begun launching what appear to be primitive observation platforms into higher orbits. The platforms are aligned specifically to monitor not just Nemesis, but the surrounding space as well. For the first time, Admiral Excelvoth felt a flicker of unease. They're looking for us. Yes, Admiral, confirmed Narleth. And given their rate of technological adaptation, I believe we should reconsider our timeline. Excelvoth's feeding tentacles writhed in agitation. Accelerate the extraction schedule. We'll deploy the harvesting fleet as soon as the first major deposits are exposed. The Coalition needs these resources. The humans' suspicions are irrelevant. As the crew dispersed to their stations, Vexmorth lingered, her cybernetic eye whirring as it focused on the blue planet. Something troubles you, strategist? Asked Excelvoth. A pattern from the historical archives, Admiral, she replied. There are documented cases of seemingly primitive species developing rapidly when faced with existential threats. It would be unwise to underestimate adaptive potential. Excelvoth dismissed her concern with a gesture. We have a fleet of 300 vessels with technology millennia beyond their capabilities. Even if they identify us as the cause of their troubles, what could they possibly do? As if in answer, alarms began to sound throughout the command deck. Multiple launches detected from the planet's surface, announced the sensor operator. Hundreds of small vehicles entering low orbit. Weapons? Demanded Excelvoth. Negative, Admiral. They appear to be observation satellites. They're arranging themselves in a grid pattern that will provide complete surveillance of near-Earth space. Excelvoth stared at the tactical display, watching as Earth bristled with new electronic eyes, all searching the darkness. For the first time, he wondered if the Coalition's hunger for resources had led them to underestimate a species that seemed more adaptable than anyone had anticipated. Maintain stealth protocols, he ordered, and accelerate the timeline. I want extraction to begin the moment conditions permit. But as he issued the command, Excelvoth couldn't shake the feeling that the supposedly primitive inhabitants of Earth might prove to be more troublesome than anyone in the Coalition had expected. Part 2. Unexpected Resistance. The Situation Room beneath Geneva's International Response Coordination Center hummed with activity. Screens displayed real-time data from the global network of newly deployed orbital satellites, weather patterns, tectonic activity, and the increasingly erratic behavior of Earth's oceans. Dr. Eleanor Chen presented the latest findings to the assembled international delegation. Behind her, a holographic simulation showed the rogue planet Nemesis in its elliptical orbit around Earth. The gravitational distortions continue to intensify, she explained. We're seeing unprecedented tectonic activity along major fault lines. However, she highlighted specific regions on the global map. The pattern of geological disruption doesn't match our models. General Williams of the United Earth Defense Council leaned forward. Meaning? The seismic events are too selective, Eleanor clarified. They're concentrated in regions with high densities of rare earth elements and other valuable minerals. Areas that should be equally affected based on tectonic vulnerability are showing minimal disruption. Dr. Ramirez advanced the presentation to show a series of spectroscopic analyses. We've also detected energy signatures in the upper atmosphere consistent with advanced propulsion systems. Something is up there, watching us, and it's not making any effort to communicate. The Secretary General of the United Nations spoke for the first time. You're suggesting an extraterrestrial mining operation. It's the only theory that fits all observed phenomena, Eleanor confirmed. Nemesis was deliberately placed in its current orbit to create geological instability, exposing mineral deposits for easier extraction while simultaneously destabilizing our civilization. General Williams stood, addressing the room. The orbital defense grid will be fully operational within 48 hours. The converted ICBMs have been retrofitted with the new gravitational disruptor warheads, conceptually similar to whatever technology was used to move Nemesis, though far more primitive. Will they be effective? Asked the Chinese premier. Against conventional spacecraft, yes, replied Williams. But we're operating on theoretical models and reverse-engineered concepts. We don't know what kind of defenses these visitors might have. The Russian president's expression was grim. If they wanted to communicate, they would have done so by now. Their actions show clear hostile intent. Agreed, said President Harrington. The evacuation of coastal cities continues, but we can't simply abandon our planet to strip mining. We need to demonstrate that Earth is not defenseless. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Humanity was facing its first contact with an extraterrestrial civilization, one that had come not in peace, but to exploit Earth's resources with complete disregard for its inhabitants. The unified satellite grid has given us something else, added Eleanor, changing the display to show a section of space approximately 500,000 kilometers from Earth. We've detected gravitational anomalies consistent with large cloaked vessels in this region. Based on the distortion patterns, we estimate a fleet of several hundred ships. Then that's our target, declared General Williams. We're only going to get one shot at this. If we can disrupt their cloaking technology and force them to reveal themselves, it might change the dynamic of this encounter. The Secretary General nodded slowly. Proceed with the operation. May God help us all. On the command deck of the Harvester Prime, the mood had shifted from confident anticipation to growing concern. Admiral, reported Security Director Grashnak, the humans have deployed an extensive orbital grid within the past solar rotation. Their satellites are equipped with advanced sensor arrays, nothing that should detect our presence, but the coverage is troubling. Exelvoth studied the tactical display showing Earth bristling with new satellites. Have the extraction vessels maintained position. We'll proceed once the next major tectonic event exposes the northern mineral deposits. Science Officer Narleth approached, her bioluminescent patterns pulsing with urgency. Admiral, we've intercepted and decoded a significant portion of their communications. They know we're here. Somehow, they've identified the artificial nature of Nemesis' orbit and connected it to resource extraction. Impossible, insisted Grashnak. Their scientific understanding is far too limited. Evidently not, countered Vexmorth. I warned of their adaptive capabilities. They've made remarkable technological leaps in the past 30 rotations. They're already developing crude gravitational manipulation concepts based solely on observing the effects of our technology. Zelvoth's feeding tentacles writhed with agitation. It changes nothing. They have no means to. Energy surge detected from the planet's surface, interrupted the sensor operator. Multiple launches in progress. Primitive missiles. Asked Exelvoth, mandibles clicking in amusement. Negative. Admiral, replied the operator, his voice rising with concern. They're deploying some form of gravitational disruptor technology. Crude, but potentially effective against our cloaking systems. Impossible, roared Grashnak. They couldn't have developed such technology so quickly. Yet they have, observed Vexmorth calmly. These humans appear to excel at innovation under pressure. Zelvoth slammed his primary appendage against the command console. Evasive maneuvers. All vessels disperse and maintain cloaking integrity. The massive coalition fleet began to scatter, abandoning their carefully coordinated positions. But the human weapons had been launched with surprising precision, not aimed directly at the alien vessels, but strategically positioned to create a web of gravitational disturbance that would reveal any hidden ships. The first distortion wave hit the outer vessels of the fleet, immediately causing fluctuations in their cloaking fields. On Earth, satellite monitors lit up as hundreds of massive ships suddenly became visible against the blackness of space. In the Geneva Command Center, a cheer erupted as the displays showed the alien fleet materializing. "It worked," exclaimed Julian, eyes wide with amazement. "Look at the size of that fleet. There must be over 300 vessels." Eleanor's expression remained tense. "Now we've poked the hornet's nest. What's their response going to be?" On the main tactical display, the alien ships were regrouping, their formations suggesting defensive posturing rather than immediate aggression. General Williams addressed the room. "Phase 1 complete. We've revealed their presence and demonstrated technological capability beyond what they expected from us. Now comes the diplomatic gambit." President Harrington stepped forward. "Transmit the first contact package on all frequencies. Let's see if they're willing to talk now that they know they're not dealing with helpless primitives." On the Harvester Prime, the command deck had descended into chaos. "Cloaking systems compromised fleet-wide," reported the operations officer. "We're fully exposed to their observation." Zelvoff's 6 eyes blinked rapidly in sequence, a sign of extreme agitation among his kind. How? How could they possibly have developed countermeasures to technology they've never encountered? Vex Morth analyzed the incoming data with remarkable calm. They reverse-engineered the basic principles from observing the gravitational effects of Nemesis. Primitive but effective implementation. "Admiral, they're transmitting a communication package on multiple frequencies." "Ignore it," snapped Zelvoff. "Prepare the fleet for direct intervention. If they want to challenge the coalition, they'll learn the consequences." Science Officer Narleth studied the transmission. "Admiral, I strongly advise against hostile action at this juncture. The humans have demonstrated unexpected technological adaptability. This communication appears to be an invitation to dialogue. The coalition does not negotiate with primitive species over resources we require," declared Zelvoff. "With respect, Admiral," countered Vex Morth, "this species has just demonstrated they are not as primitive as our initial assessment indicated. We should at least analyze their full capabilities before engaging in conflict." As if to punctuate her point, new alarms sounded throughout the command deck. "Multiple energy signatures detected around Nemesis," reported the sensor operator. "The humans have deployed devices on the rogue planet's surface." Zelvoff turned to the main display in disbelief. "When? How did they reach it so quickly?" "They must have launched immediately after detecting its approach," suggested Narleth, "while we were still assessing their response capabilities." "What are these devices doing?" demanded Zelvoff. The sensor data flowed in, painting an alarming picture. The humans had somehow deployed gravitational manipulation devices on Nemesis itself, crude versions of the Coalition's own technology, but positioned with strategic precision. "They're altering Nemesis' orbit," reported Zothkrax, his voice hollow with disbelief. "Not enough to remove it from Earth's vicinity, but enough to create a gravitational lens effect in this sector of space." Vex Morth's cybernetic eye whirred as she calculated the implications. "Admiral, if they activate those devices at full power, they'll create a localized gravitational distortion that could trap our fleet in this region. We would be unable to achieve escape velocity without significant engine modifications." "Preposterous," sputtered Grashnak. "No primitive species could execute such a strategy." "The evidence suggests otherwise," replied Vex Morth coolly. "They've been several steps ahead of us since detecting Nemesis. I believe they allowed us to see their initial satellite grid while concealing their true capabilities." Zelvoff stared at the tactical display, watching as the humans' devices on Nemesis powered up one by one. They were being outmaneuvered by a species they had dismissed as primitive just days ago. "Admiral," urged Narleth, "we should respond to their communication before." A blinding flash of energy erupted from Nemesis as the human devices activated simultaneously. A wave of gravitational distortion rolled outward, enveloping the coalition fleet. The massive ships shuddered, their propulsion systems straining against the sudden increase in local gravity. "Status report," bellowed Selvoth. Engineering Chief Zoth Krax's voice was edged with panic. "Gravitational field intensity has increased by a factor of 20 in this spatial region. Our engines cannot generate sufficient thrust to achieve escape velocity." "Impossible," whispered Selvoth. "They trapped us." "Yes, Admiral," confirmed Vex Morth, a note of reluctant admiration in her voice. "It appears the hunters have become the prey. The humans are transmitting again, and I believe we should listen very carefully to what they have to say." Tables turned. The face of President Harrington filled the main display on the command deck of the Harvester Prime. For the assembled Scathraxian officers, it was their first direct view of a human, a strangely symmetrical being with only 2 eyes and peculiar flat facial features. "I address the commanders of the alien fleet currently in Earth orbit," began Harrington, her voice translated by the ship's systems. "You came to our world uninvited, caused catastrophic damage to our environment and cities through your manipulation of the celestial body we call Nemesis, and prepared to extract our planet's resources without consent or communication. These are acts of aggression that would justify immediate retaliation." Zelvoth's feeding tentacles writhed with suppressed rage as he listened. "However," continued Harrington, "humanity prefers peaceful resolution when possible. You now find yourselves confined by the same gravitational technology you've deployed against us. Your fleet cannot achieve escape velocity through conventional means, effectively stranding you in Earth orbit." She paused, letting the implications sink in. "We offer you a choice. Engage in diplomatic dialogue toward a peaceful resolution, or face the consequences of continued hostility. We await your response." The transmission ended, leaving the command deck in stunned silence. "Can they actually contain us with this gravitational field?" asked Selvoth, turning to his engineering chief. Zoth Krax's appendages moved in the equivalent of a reluctant nod. "The field is crude but effective. Our current engine configurations cannot generate sufficient thrust to break free. We would need significant modifications, weeks of work at minimum." "And if we attempt hostile action?" inquired Grashnak. Vex Morth displayed the latest sensor analysis. "The humans have deployed additional weapons platforms in orbit. Analysis suggests they've adapted the same gravitational technology into localized disruptors that could potentially disable our vessels individually. Their strategic positioning indicates they anticipated our most likely attack vectors." Zelvoth paced the command deck, his massive form radiating tension. "How could we have so severely misjudged their capabilities? We assumed technological development followed a linear progression," observed Narleth. "But these humans appear to make exponential leaps when faced with existential threats. They've compressed centuries of gravitational physics research into mere weeks." "We have no choice but to negotiate," concluded Vex Morth, "at least until we can develop countermeasures to their gravitational trap." Zelvoth's 6 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of reluctant acceptance. "Prepare a response. We will engage in this dialogue." The conference room within the International Space Station had been hastily modified to accommodate both human and Scathraxian physiology. The Earth delegation, led by President Harrington and Dr. Eleanor Chen, waited as the alien representatives were escorted in by UN peacekeepers. Admiral Excelvoth entered first, his imposing form towering over the humans. Behind him came Science Officer Nerleth, Security Director Grashnak, and Strategist Vex Morth. The stark contrast between species was immediately apparent. The Scathraxians, with their multi-limbed bodies, compound eyes, and chitinous exoskeletons, seemed designed for entirely different evolutionary pressures than the bipedal humans. "Welcome to the International Space Station," began President Harrington, her voice steady despite the historic nature of the moment. "I am President Harrington of the United Earth Government, and these are my colleagues." Zelvoth's translated voice filled the chamber. "I am Admiral Axel Voth of the Unified Stellar Coalition. We acknowledge this unprecedented situation and have agreed to dialogue." Eleanor studied the aliens with intense fascination. Despite the circumstances, the scientist in her couldn't help but marvel at the first confirmed extraterrestrial intelligence humanity had encountered. "Let's begin with the obvious," said Harrington. "Your intention was to use Nemesis to destabilize our planet for resource extraction. We want to understand why you chose this approach rather than diplomatic contact." Zelvoth's feeding tentacles twitched, a gesture lost on the humans, but indicating discomfort to his own kind. "The Coalition requires specific resources for our continued existence. Our surveys indicated your world possessed these in abundance. Our protocols for pre-spacefaring civilizations do not mandate diplomatic contact." "Pre-spacefaring," repeated Eleanor, unable to contain herself. "We've been exploring our solar system for decades. By Coalition standards," explained Narleth, her voice softer than Zelvoth's, "a civilization is considered pre-spacefaring until it achieves sustainable faster-than-light travel. Your chemical propulsion and limited orbital presence qualified you as primitive by our assessment matrices." General Williams leaned forward, an assessment that proved catastrophically flawed. "Evidently," acknowledged Vex Morth, her cybernetic eye studying the humans with what might have been respect. "Your species' capacity for technological adaptation under pressure is unprecedented in our records." President Harrington brought the conversation back to its purpose. "Let's discuss terms. You are effectively our prisoners, but this situation benefits no one long-term. Earth has suffered significant damage from Nemesis's gravitational effects. Millions are displaced, and coastal infrastructure worldwide is severely compromised. What do you propose?" asked Axel Voth, his tone suggesting he already anticipated the answer. "Reparations," stated Harrington firmly. "Your coalition will provide technological assistance to mitigate the damage caused by Nemesis. In exchange, we will gradually reduce the gravitational containment field, allowing your fleet to depart, one vessel at a time, as restoration milestones are met." Grashnak chittered something that the translation system rendered as indignation. "You would hold the entire coalition fleet hostage. You would have stripped our planet bare without a second thought," countered General Williams. "Consider this a measured response." Narleth intervened before tensions could escalate further. "What specific technologies would you require?" Eleanor activated a holographic display showing the cascading effects of Nemesis orbit. "First, we need your help stabilizing Nemesis itself into a safer orbit, one that won't continue to cause catastrophic tidal and seismic events on Earth. Second, we need gravitational technology to counteract the worst of the ongoing effects. And third," added Harrington, "we want knowledge exchange. Your coalition clearly has experience with many worlds and species. Humanity is ready to join the interstellar community, but as equals, not as victims." Axel Voth and his officers conferred briefly in their native language, a series of clicks, whistles, and subsonic vibrations that the human translation systems couldn't fully process. Finally, Zelvoth turned back to the human delegation. "The Coalition requires assurances that once we have fulfilled these terms, our remaining vessels will be released. We also require access to certain mineral resources, obtained through ethical extraction methods with your approval." "Those terms are negotiable," agreed Harrington, "contingent on your good faith efforts to repair the damage caused by your initial approach." 6 months later, Eleanor stood at the observation window of the newly constructed orbital monitoring station, watching as the Scythraxian engineering teams worked with human specialists to adjust Nemesis' orbit. The massive planetary body was gradually being shifted into a stable position that would minimize its gravitational impact on Earth, while still allowing it to serve as a research outpost for both species. Julian joined her, handing over a tablet with the latest progress reports. The coalition engineers have exceeded expectations. The gravitational stabilizers they've helped us develop have reduced seismic activity by 67% globally. And the coastal reclamation projects? Asked Eleanor. Ahead of schedule. Their matter manipulation technology has allowed us to rebuild faster than anyone thought possible. Eleanor nodded, her gaze fixed on the distant work crews, humans and Scythraxians collaborating on technology that would have been unimaginable a year ago. Have you seen the latest communication from Admiral Selvov? Julian smiled. The formal apology to the people of Earth. It's already gone viral. I don't think anyone expected the coalition to publicly acknowledge their grievous miscalculation of human adaptive potential. That's a direct quote. It's more than political posturing, observed Eleanor. I've been working closely with Narlith on the Knowledge Exchange Initiative. The coalition genuinely didn't understand species like ours could develop so quickly under pressure. They're fascinated by us now. Humanity has become something of a scientific curiosity among their xenobiologists. From potential victims to objects of study, Julian chuckled. I suppose it's an improvement. It's more than that, corrected Eleanor. The knowledge exchange is increasingly becoming two-way. Some of our approaches to quantum computing have surprised them. Vex Morth told me that coalition scientists are already incorporating human mathematical models into their systems. In the distance, another Scythraxian vessel disengaged from the orbital operation and set course for the edge of the solar system. It was the 73rd coalition ship to be released from Earth's gravitational containment, having fulfilled its portion of the reparation agreement. One ship at a time, murmured Julian, watching it go. At this rate, it will be another year before their fleet is fully released, by which time humanity will have established formal diplomatic relations with the coalition and a dozen other interstellar civilizations they've introduced us to, noted Eleanor. President Harrington is already discussing terms for Earth's representation in some sort of galactic council. Julian shook his head in amazement. All because they underestimated how quickly we could adapt to a threat. Their mistake, said Eleanor with a small smile, was assuming that moving an asteroid into our orbit would make us easy to harvest. Instead, it became their prison and our gateway to the stars.